Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. It is Wednesday, and I want to start off by apologizing for my morning newsletter. I mean, as I wrote, I considered trying to find the equivalent of a pony buried in all the merde of last night's primary elections, but I failed. The election results were bad. The worst is yet to come. And I'm just sort of bracing myself for all the unsubscribes. Just like I almost actually made the headline of the newsletter. You're probably not going to want to read today's newsletter, but you will want to listen to today's podcast because we are joined by my colleague Will Saletan, who is here to discuss an absolute clusterfuck of news. That was your phrase, so I wasn't going to use that word, but
Yeah,
so
the difference between me and Charlie is Charlie uses the expletive on the air.
so I don't know where to begin of all of this. I mean, I'm tempted to start with the primaries, but it's early. So could we talk about the woman that paid Kimberly Guilfoyle $60,000 to give the 2-minute speech at January 6th? I'm sorry, she's an heiress. She's the heiress to the Publix chain. I don't know.
Right.
Here's an indication that you just have too much money, right? I mean, she could have gone out in her backyard and just burned the cash, but she gave it to Kimberly freaking Guilfoyle.
Well, in her defense, the Donald Trump Jr. and Kim Guilfoyle really needed that $60,000. So I'm glad that she's redistributing some of her oligarchic income.
Well, that is true. A little bit of spreading the money around. So Lauren Boebert is back in the news. There's certain aspects of this that we're not going to talk about. I'm just not going there. I mean, there are people who are retweeting things, and my position on all of this is that if something is out there on Twitter, you can sit back. I mean, honestly, believe it or not, I know this will seem contrarian, but we can actually wait to have a take on something until we find out whether or not it's true. Radical, I know, but but there is one thing, and I don't know whether you caught this, Will. Lauren Boebert is speaking at, it looks like some Christian Bible camp or something. Do you know what the venue was?
I don't know what the venue is. No.
Yeah, okay, but it's got some Christian things. So clearly it's probably an audience of people who are evangelical, who are presumably somewhat tangentially familiar with the New Testament. And she's talking about Jesus and AR-15. So can you tell the story better than I can? Will, I think you
Well,
can.
she's on stage and she's talking about gun rights and
Mm.
people invoking Jesus, and she says that Jesus, quote, didn't have enough, meaning AR-15s, to keep his government from killing him, like that he needed to arm himself, right, again. And that's the lesson she takes from the story of Jesus.
Well,
So
that's a big complaint of the apostles in the, in the gospel according to Luke. They're all sitting around thinking, if we just had AR-15s, and I guess I was into, now she's doing it in the context of people are always asking me, what would Jesus do? Well, Jesus didn't need an AR-15. Well, if Jesus had an AR-15, his government wouldn't have been able to kill him. I mean, the theology behind that is sound, isn't it? I mean, it's
well,
because I'm trying to imagine the Christians, and can you hear the air quotes above my head here? The air quotes. The Christians in the audience listening to that and going, yeah, that's good. Good point, Lauren. What?
in her defense,
Okay.
in Lauren Boebert's
Okay.
defense, what
Okay.
she did is discussed heavily in the Bible. It is called idolatry, right?
Yes.
It is there was the cult of the golden calf, and in Lauren Boebert's case, and the case of all those air quote Christians you're talking about, there's the cult of the AR-15. And one of the delights about this otherwise grotesque story is watching actual Christians respond to her remarks by quoting the actual Bible, and quoting the actual Jesus, who said, "Put your sword in its place, for all those who take the sword will perish by the sword." Jesus literally said, "Don't defend me with arms against the government that is wrongly coming for me," because Jesus was
Awkward.
practicing. Yeah, so
Awkward.
the actual Christians have the contradictory quote.
See, that's fake news in the gospel. Okay, okay. I'm sorry. I'm really, really tempted to go down this rabbit hole, but I am not going to do it. Okay, since I'm in this mood, and because I'm trying to delay talking about the election, I've changed in my news that I used to have I call it cheap shots, but I've updated it to the FFS update, which you can translate. And I devoted it today to Dinesh D'Souza. And I'm sorry, I know this sounds like low hanging fruit, but did you see his tweet where I am so proud of my Pride Month attire? I'm posting it again. Find this and other cool stuff at shopDineshD'Souza.com. And there is Dinesh D'Souza. I cannot make this. I'm sorry. What I wrote is like, I don't know that you're old enough, Will, to remember there was actually a time when Dinesh D'Souza was actually taken seriously. Really, he had pretensions to intellectual seriousness. He wrote books. The guy was actually the president of a college for a while until he was fired for being involved in a sex scandal. But and then the rest. No, the whole indictment, convicted felon, pardoned by the president. Bullshit movie. He's had an interesting week. Former Attorney General Bill Barr laughing at his stupid 2,000 mules. So apparently he felt the need to change the narrative by posting a picture of himself sitting, and I am not making this up, sitting on a riding lawnmower, tractor lawnmower, wearing a T-shirt that reads "Proud member of the LGBFJB community, D'Souza." Okay, now, okay, so this is not rocket science. It's he's so clever. LGB. You know what that means. I mean, let's go, Brandon. And FJB. I think you can work that out on your
Okay,
own.
yeah.
So, I mean, you have this mouth breathing middle school humor. As I said, fuck Joe Biden on my T-shirt, and I have mock gays and everything. And we could talk about the gay bashing and all of that stuff. But I am obsessed about the choice of the riding lawnmower because not. I mean, it was probably the same thinking that put Michael Dukakis in the tank. Do you remember this? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to look macho. And D'Souza, I mean, he's thinking that this is my manly, men of the people, populist nerd vibe thing that he's capturing with all of his merch. It's so pathetic. I just,
Wait, I
I
have a
had to
question
wallow
about
in it.
this.
Yeah,
I'm
please.
a little puzzled. So the macho thing is to sit in your mower, not push it. Is that correct?
I don't have any idea what he's doing. I mean, I think it's a fair bet that Dinesh D'Souza has never mowed his lawn ever. But
Yeah.
he's posing. He chooses, I'm going to pose with the T-shirt, this hat, this shit-eating grin. There's a flag in the back, so I'm a patriot. I'm a man. I hate gays. I mean, so, what?
Well,
So in
isn't
his defense, Will, I want to hear this.
I'm still grappling with the idea that the actual sort of, there would be physical exertion involved in pushing a mower, but sitting on a mower is kind of a white collar guy's idea of a blue collar guy. I mean, it's like, I'm going to be riding around on this thing that's going to carry me, and I'm going to, but, setting that aside, it's kind of a perfect distillation of what the Republican Party is now, right? I mean, there are no issues involved. There's
No.
no agenda. There's no like what we're going to do for you. It's all about resentment. So the expletive, the FJB, which we all know what that is, right? That's it. That's the signifier.
That's it. Anyway, so I think we should make a feature, you know, In Their Defense by Will Saletan. I think this could be a thing. Maybe that could be your next book. In
I,
Their
I
Defense.
I feel like the
I like
reality
this.
is so awful that
I know.
I just have to descend into the irony of calling everything a defense
Yeah.
because it is related. It's just everything's all the values are upside down.
Well, and you can tell what I'm doing here. I'm actually in serious denial. Okay, so we should talk about the election. I mean, where do we start? Representative Tom Rice from South Carolina, one of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump and was the first impeachment vote to actually face a primary, was just hammered last night by his Trump-backed opponent. He got like 25% of the vote and ousted. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who briefly, for like 5 minutes, had her Trump doubts and was faced by a Trump endorsed candidate, survived. But she's very different than Tom Rice because she is the one who went on that grovel tour. She actually went up to Trump Tower to pledge her fealty to the Orange God King forever. So there's that in South Carolina. And then you'll have a flat out election denier winning the Republican primary for Secretary of State in Nevada. This is a guy who told NBC News that he would not have certified the 2020 results. Or would you like to talk about the Republicans flipping a once solidly Democratic congressional seat in an overwhelmingly Hispanic district down in Texas? I mean, red lights are going off all over the place. That demographic shift is real. And then, as I wrote in my newsletter, which I dare you to read, the cherry on top of this steaming pile of awful, this new USA Today Suffolk University poll in Pennsylvania has right-wing conspiracy theorist, insurrectionist Doug Mastriano within 4 points of the Democratic candidate for governor, and that's within the margin of error. So, happy fucking Wednesday, Will.
I'm sorry, Charlie. Reality really is a bitch.
Yeah.
What I saw last night was a lot of pundits trying to sort of puzzle over, okay, Tom Rice loses, but Nancy Mace survives. So it's kind of a mixed verdict. I don't
No,
see it as a
no.
mixed verdict. I mean, as you're pointing out, I mean, Tom Rice voted for impeachment. Nancy Mace did not vote for impeachment. Nancy Mace barely survived her primary against a Trump backed opponent after what? I mean, her sin was voting to certify the 2020 election. That's it. I mean, and she voted to enforce the subpoena against Steve Bannon. But she voted against impeachment, and she does the sort of, stalker ex-girlfriend video outside of Trump Tower. She's talking all about how she's not a never Trumper. She's a Trumper. And
Right.
the idea that this Trumper can barely survive having voted to certify the election, that's just more evidence of the degree to which the party is Trumpified. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, the headline I remember from Vanity Fair was South Carolina Congresswoman pledges total devotion to Trump one day after he endorses opponent. So, she was rewarded for the debased self-debasement, the groveling, whereas Tom Rice, who can we just spend a moment on him? I mean, this guy's a mensch. He never backed off, and I don't think he got as much credit as he deserved. Look, all praise to Liz Cheney, but Tom Rice was another guy. Nobody saw his vote coming last January, and then while a lot of these other Republicans sort of went to ground, went back into the tall grass and everything, Tom Rice didn't. He continued to be strong. He pushed back against Trump, so he lost with his dignity intact, which I think counts for something. But again, Tom Rice, he's a mensch, so of course there's no place for him in the Republican Party. There's no place for him in the party of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Sarah Palin, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and Donald Trump. And I'm not sure there's anything puzzling about that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Tom Rice, he's not a never Trumper. Tom Rice
No.
voted with Donald Trump 94% of the time. That was a number that he used
But
a lot,
Liz
right?
Cheney, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But that's policy. That's policy. And as we were just discussing, the Republican Party is no longer about policy, right? So this guy is written out, is thoroughly defeated in his primary because on the one thing that matters, which is the worst thing, it is rejecting the election results and his vote for impeachment. That one heresy matters more than all of the policy. So to me, it's a story about the Republican Party. And Charlie, you were talking before about he's the first one of the impeachers, the 10 who voted for impeachment, to face a primary, to lose his primary. But we already have, as you know, 4 who are retiring out of the
Right.
10.
Right.
We've only got one who's safe, and that's the guy in California, Valadao, who
Yeah.
is in a Biden district. So we're still looking at the possibility of losing nearly all of those 10. And it's sort of a story of Trump's triumph within the Republican Party. But the bigger story is the Republican Party becoming so devoted to this one lie about Trump and this one madness that in the future, hopefully, they will. I mean, I would like to believe that in the future, Tom Rice will be understood as the hero he is. So will Liz Cheney,
Mhm.
regardless of whether they come back into politics officially or not.
Well, I agree with you, and I think, any of you that were wondering where the wind was blowing on all of this and what might happen with Liz Cheney in Wyoming, I think this is a pretty good indication. I don't know how else you interpret that. But again, Liz Cheney, I'm gonna come back to her in a moment. If she goes down, I think she will think it was worth it. Okay, so let's talk about, Nevada. Election denier won the primary for Secretary of State, and Trump-backed candidates also won in the Senate race and the governor's race, and so Politico's playbook notes 2020 election deniers are winning everywhere, not Georgia, but winning everywhere else. It's becoming more common than not for Republicans who support false election fraud theories to win Republican primaries. In many places, it is now the establishment GOP position.
Yeah. First of all, this guy in Nevada, Marchant, he said not. It's not just that he's an election. I mean, he said he wouldn't have certified the
Yeah.
vote, and it's not just as we pointed. He's this. He would be the Secretary of State. He would be the person who has to certify it, right? He would not do so. He also said that he would not rule out doing an alternate slate of electors in the next round. I mean, he said and he wants to get rid of early vote. I love talking about early voting because these Republicans who say they want to get rid of early voting, it's a tell. It's a tell that they're not really interested in election fraud because early voting is in person. It's in-person voting, just like voting on election day. The only reason you would be against early voting, in-person voting, is to make it harder for people to vote. No, you can only vote on this one day, and if you can't get that shift off from your job, you're screwed. So he's awful. Mastriano, the guy in Pennsylvania, as you were pointing out that poll, Shapiro, the Democratic nominee, is at 44%. Mastriano is at 40%. That is a solid 40% in Pennsylvania, in a
Right.
crucial swing state,
For a
for
real
somebody,
nut job.
a guy who was at January 6th. He
Yeah.
was there. He was heavily involved in it and involved in trying to overturn the election in numerous other ways before January 6th. So that just shows you how many Republicans and how many Americans, how many people in Pennsylvania don't care about democracy. They're just willing to vote for the Republican Party line, regardless of who's on it.
Well, it also gives you an indication of just how overwhelming the political environment is working against the Democrats right now. I think it's not so much they don't care about democracy as that it's not top of mind for them, especially when they're inflation, interest rates, the stock market, all of those things out there. I mean, it feels like this just perfect storm. And okay, let's move on to this. What is your take on what's happening to the Hispanic vote? I mean, we are watching a tectonic shift, possibly, at least in Texas, with the Hispanic votes, where you have an overwhelmingly Hispanic district that has always been Democratic, flipped now to a Republican. Now, there's going to be a rerun in November, and they've changed the lines and everything. But you're seeing Republicans winning in counties they've never won in before right now. So give me your take on what's happening there, because I think a lot of us, a lot of Democrats though, as well, had the impression that in the era of Trump, there's just no way that Hispanics are ever going to vote for Republicans, not even in the short term, maybe never again. And yet it's happening. What's going on?
Well, so Democrats, progressives have this idea about Hispanic voters. It's an idea they have generally that people vote on the basis of identity, right? Identity drives everything. What is your ethnicity? I'm Latino, therefore I will vote Democratic. And what Latino voters are, the message they're sending back is no, actually, we're like you. We're like the white people. We don't vote the color of our skin necessarily. We don't identify one party with it. We have real concerns. We have economic concerns. We're not happy about they're not happy about the economic situation, just like white people. Also, the border situation in Texas is bad. There's major problems going on at the border, and the Texans and people in South Texas are having to deal with that. And the National Democratic Party isn't really paying so much attention to this. This is an issue you only hear about on Fox News. And in fairness, it's the only issue you hear about on Fox News, and they talk about it too much. But Democrats don't talk about it at all. In South Texas, people are upset about it. That seems to have played some role in this. But the Democratic Party, Charlie, this is a district that Obama won by like 20 plus
Yeah,
points.
yeah.
And there is a shift going on, and the shift is clearly not based on ethnicity. This is an 85% Hispanic district.
Yeah.
It's like you don't need to look at the Hispanic crosstab in this district. The district is the crosstab, right? So that's a very clear message to the National Democratic Party. Wake up.
Yeah, well, what I wrote this morning was, how about now? Are the Democrats ready to pay attention to what Reed Teixeira has been saying about this? Because, Reed wrote the book, The Emerging Democratic Majority, but he's been sounding the alarms again and again and again about what's happening. And he wrote, it's hard to avoid the conclusion the Democrats have seriously erred by lumping Hispanics in with people of color and assuming they embrace the activism around racial issues that dominated so much of the political scene in 2020. This was a flawed assumption. The reality of the Hispanic population is that they are, broadly speaking, an overwhelmingly working class, economically progressive, but socially moderate constituency that cares above all about jobs, the economy, and healthcare. And so, again, I think that there was a certain take them for granted. The Browning of America meant we're just going to win elections forever. And it's just not true. You made another point here, and Reach Shara, to quote him again, talks about the Fox News fallacy on the left, which is that he describes it that if Fox News thinks that something is a big issue, then clearly we have to decide that it's not. So if Fox News talks about crime, we will ignore it. If Fox News says that there is a crisis at the border, obviously that's not true. And he says, no, you've kind of been rope-a-doped into ignoring real problems here. And I think you're seeing that. We talk about this is the wake-up call. I don't know. Are they going to wake up? I mean, at some point, are Democrats going to look around the country and see these nut jobs, see the Herschel Walkers, see the Eric Greitens, see the JD Vances, see the Lauren Boeberts and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and say, hey, how are we losing to these people? How
Yeah.
are we losing? I mean, internally, what are they telling themselves? I mean, well, Fox News is not an answer to every question about why you are losing elections, not just marginal elections, but elections that you shouldn't even be close, that you would, and you're still losing. What do you think?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, the problem is it's you and me talking, and what are
Oh,
the we don't run the Democratic Party. What we have, Charlie, is we have a totally crazy party in the Republican Party
yeah,
that is just like has no, completely committed to lies, completely committed to like we get it having its way regardless of whether it actually won the most votes.
right.
And the other party, so we desperately need the other party to be sane. The other party has its own problems. They are not nearly, in my opinion, as bad as the Republican Party's
Mhm.
problems, right?
But they're
They're
losing.
like, yes, they are losing, and they do need to sort of get out of their pathological thinking about like the one thing that I disagree with in Roy Teixeira's now. I mean, I love Roy Teixeira, but
Yeah.
it's not like Hispanics aren't voting like people of color. This is a general point. This isn't just about Latinos. This is about people of color. People of color are people. Okay. Do not assume, from the color of someone's skin, how they will vote, how they will think. So it's not just Latinos. There's plenty of black people in cities do not take the left wing line on policing, for example. Like there's real crime. We need cops here. We need good cops who respect us, but we need crime control. And so that does not comport with a lot of crazy left wing thinking. I don't know what is the mechanism I mean, presumably what's going to happen this year is Republicans will take the House. God knows what else they will take. And will Democrats feel that, okay, we need to set aside some of our policy aims because we have to be the sane party? I don't know if they'll do that.
I don't know. So I linked to Josh Kraushaar, who's sort of running the numbers about how big will the Republican wave be, and he says, look, it's here's the number that he's kind of circling. He says, mark the number 248, which would mean that they picked up 35 net seats on the scorecard. That would be a sign of a true political tsunami, because simply winning 242 seats, which would be a 29 seat gain, would match the party's 2010 standing, which was a big win. Anything at 233 or higher, plus 20, would give Kevin McCarthy enough breathing room to manage his caucus effectively without having to fear the most extreme House Republicans from disrupting his best laid plans. So that's now becoming what, the pundits are thinking, 20, 30 seats, possibly more. And then, of course, there is the Senate. Okay, let's take a deep breath, because all of this is taking place as the evidence continues to mount of the criminal conspiracy led by the leader of the Republican Party. And this is where my head starts to get a little hot here. That the evidence is overwhelming that Donald Trump, who will be the Republican nominee in 2024, most likely, conspired to overturn a free and fair election. And we've had this extraordinary scene of watching people in his own administration explain why this was wrong, how they had told him that he was believing a big lie and that he didn't believe it. You had a really extraordinary piece in the Bulwark yesterday, and I want to discuss that right after this. It's the final week for Genucel's summer blowout sale. Now save over 60% off Genucel's most popular package at Genucel.com and get 2 free gifts with your order. Your order will include Genucel's dark spot corrector to visibly reduce those pesky dark sunspots free, and Genucel's immediate effects for results in as little as 12 hours. Genucel's dark spot corrector uses special peptides to visibly reduce the appearance of dark spots, age spots, and yes, even sunspots that summer leaves behind. Look, Genucel's been known for quality skincare since the very first treatment for under eye bags and puffiness. It's a great product for the summer and for the heat, humidity, and the longer days give us all some under eye puffiness. You know what I mean. And that's also included in your most popular package today. Genucel guarantees results or your money back. And sign up for Genucel's best-in-class rewards program at checkout for an extra 10% off your order and complimentary gift set. Go to Genucel.com/bulwark, Genucel.com/bulwark, and enter my promo code BULWARK at checkout for an extra discount and free shipping. Go to Genucel.com/bulwark. That's Genucel.com/bulwark. All right, we are back with my colleague Will Saletan. Okay, I want to talk to you about your piece in the Bulwark yesterday because I think that you and Mona Charen addressed, the just one of the key issues that I think have been missed by some of the pundits, which is this whole question of what did Donald Trump know and when did he know it? Was he lying or was he delusional? And there are some people out there who are saying, a lot of this testimony of people telling him, you lost the election and Trump refusing to believe it is actually evidence that he did not have criminal intent, because you have to have criminal intent in order to, be held liable. But I thought you made this great point that if Trump wasn't lying, that's actually worse. So make your case.
Okay, so in Mona's defense, Mona Charen, right, legally, criminally, et cetera, it doesn't exactly matter whether Trump was lying or delusional. He was told, the facts by people he should have trusted,
Yep.
by people who knew the facts, and he just didn't. He refused to accept them, and that for various legal reasons, he's legally accountable for that. However, my conclusion from watching that hearing, there was lots of interesting testimony. I did not care for the Thursday hearing the week before, but the Monday hearing was really interesting. Lots of video testimony from people who had interacted with Trump. And all of those episodes of interaction with Trump showed not a man who had a kind of Nixonian awareness of what the truth was, and we're going to cover it up. It was a Trumpian denial. He was absolutely impervious to the information. And so my takeaway was he's not lying in the traditional Nixonian or Bill Clintonian sense, right? It's that Donald Trump simply cannot accept information, no matter how well substantiated, that he doesn't like. And in this case, it was information that he had lost the election and needed to get out of the White House. So that makes him delusional, and delusional about something that makes him a danger to the United States of America. The idea of putting back in power a man whom we now have multiple witnesses testifying that they told him he had lost an election and he refused to accept it, and he prepared to use and did use violence and every lever of government to try to stay in power. The notion of putting that person back in power is horrifying. And the fact that he does not know, in my opinion, that it is not true, and that no matter what he is told, makes him a much, much more dangerous person as a potential future president than if he knew he were lying. So that's my case.
Well, I think it's a very powerful case, and it seems self-evident that, lying is bad, it's terrible, but a president who, is delusional, given the powers of the presidency, hello, raises all kinds of questions. I talked with Mona on our secret podcast about this, and I thought that she also made the point that, even after 6 years, we're having a hard time understanding this Trumpian mind that you were just describing, that it's sort of a category error when we think about, true or false, because his mind doesn't even work that way. And I think her analogy was something like, it's like asking whether a Komodo dragon prefers hip hop or smooth jazz. I mean, it's just irrelevant to understanding his mind. The notion that listening to all of this, that Republicans would still go, absolutely, this is the man that we want to put back in the Oval Office with his finger on the button, in charge of the IRS, the CIA, the FBI, and the Justice Department. That is absolutely mind-boggling. Okay, so since before we do, you said you didn't like the last Thursday's hearing. I was kind of a fan of that, so I was interested in hearing what you didn't like.
Apparently I'm the outlier, but
That's
Charlie, that
fine.
hearing was so staged. It was so the witnesses were not actually providing information. It was for emotional effect. You
Yeah.
didn't really learn anything about, I mean, all the learning was about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and that was useful. But the Monday hearing was lots of information. It was lots of behind the scenes people, Bill Barr, Bill Stepien, the people who worked directly with Trump talking about I felt like I learned a lot from that. And I
Yeah.
think that is a role that the committee can play. I'm hopeful that the other hearings will be like the Monday hearing, not like the Thursday hearing.
So what's interesting about this is it feels like they're learning in process, that they're developing more of a strategy. I was more favorable to what happened on Thursday. I agree with you about the live testimony. I thought was a little bit uneven. I didn't quite get having the documentary maker testify live. What was that about? I don't know. Especially when you had all of these cops sitting right behind him who had really compelling stories. That I mean, like, hello, there's Harry Dunn right the freak there. He's right there. Okay, they have things to say. But let me just play something that was very very interesting. You have Liz Cheney. Put out a tweet yesterday, a video previewing tomorrow's hearing. It's kind of like, what you do with a movie or a mini series saying, okay, here's a highlight that's coming. It's also kind of interesting. And I want to put this in a little bit of context because there seems to be a little bit of a disagreement between Liz Cheney and the chairman of the committee about whether or not the committee will make a quote unquote criminal referral to the Justice Department. Now, I actually think that's overblown, but Benny Thompson says, no, we're not going to do that. She is saying we haven't made a decision to do that. And very clearly, she has been laying out a case for criminal charges. The reason I say maybe it's overblown because it doesn't matter what the committee says. They have it's not a formal thing. The Department of Justice is going to do what it's going to do, regardless of whether or not the committee, says this. In any case, while there is this sort of back and forth about criminal charges, not criminal charges, she puts out this preview video. Let's play the audio of this because it ends with, I think, a pretty kick-ass soundbite.
The Select Committee's hearing showed all Americans that President Trump's claims of a stolen 2020 election were, to use former Attorney General Barr's words, complete nonsense. We heard this from Donald Trump's own campaign experts, his own campaign lawyers, his own campaign manager, his attorney general, and others Donald Trump appointed to leadership positions in the U.S. Department of Justice. President Trump's advisors knew what he was saying was false, and they told him so directly and repeatedly. The testimony from our first two hearings is available on the Select Committee's website, so all Americans can easily view it. In our next hearing on Thursday, the Select Committee will examine President Trump's relentless effort on January 6th and in the days beforehand to pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count lawful electoral votes. As a federal judge has indicated, this likely violated two federal criminal statutes. President Trump had no factual basis for what he was doing, and he had been told it was illegal. Despite this, President Trump plotted with a lawyer named John Eastman and others to overturn the outcome of the election on January 6th. To give you a sense of the gravity of these issues, here is a clip of one of President Trump's own White House lawyers, Eric Hirschman, who talked to Mr. Eastman the day after January 6th.
It was the day after. Eastman, I don't remember why he called me, or he texted me or called me, wanted to talk with me, and he said he couldn't reach others. And he started to ask me about something dealing with Georgia and preserving something potentially for appeal. And I said to him, are you out of your effing mind? Right? I said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition. And I screamed, I said, I don't want to hear any other effing words coming out of your mouth, no matter what, other than orderly transition. Repeat those words to me. And I screamed that, and he said, eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it. And then I hung up on him.
I love that. I actually love it. And then I hung up on him. So tomorrow we're going to be hearing a lot about that sort of thing. And also the hearing that was supposed to be today, they canceled, is going to focus on the Department of Justice. I'm interested in this character, Jeffrey Clark, and what we are learning about him. Will, I know you've been paying attention to that too.
Yeah, I mean, the story that was in the Washington Post was, that
Awesome.
Clark, who was as like a relatively low level official in the Justice Department, is like at the White. So it's an end run around the leadership of the Justice Department, around the then.
Right. Well, they wanted to make him. I mean, he came within like 5 minutes, it looks like, of becoming
Right.
the acting attorney general, and then using the power of the Department of Justice to push the big lie. So
This story, I want people to understand how easy it is to destroy democracy in the United States of America. It really is not hard at all. This story illustrates, number one, this guy, he's a low-level official in the Justice Department. He end runs the actual leader. By the way, this all happens because Bill Barr, because he thinks Trump is, in his words, lost contact with reality. What does Bill Barr do? Does he come out and say the president is completely insane? We have to stop this. We have to do the 25th. No, Bill Barr quietly leaves, right? Doesn't say a damn thing. So he's now got an acting AG, Jeffrey Rosen. This guy Clark has got contacts in the White House, and Trump and this low-level official are conspiring. Clark is going to the White House, going to go around the leadership of the Justice Department, make me the attorney general. And all Trump has to do is say yes. Appoint this guy attorney general. And the deal is that Clark says he's going to send a letter out saying that there are significant concerns about the accuracy of the vote. And then they're going to use this letter to justify the alternate slates of electors, to stop the counting of votes on January 6th, to put in the Trump electors. I mean, that's all it takes is this appointment and a letter and some friendly governors or secretaries of state, the ones we're very close to electing this year, and poof, you have a coup, right? That's how close we are. That's how easy it is.
So this account in the Washington Post is really good. History is calling, Clark told Trump, according to a deposition. This is our opportunity. We can get this done. I mean, he wanted to do this, right? And what happened was the Department of Justice pushed back on him. And Rich Donahue, he said, don't do this. And he says, what happens if within 48 hours we have hundreds of resignations from your Justice Department because of your actions? What does that say about your leadership? So this was the threat. Mass resignations. Look, I think that people need to fully understand what a Trump 2.0 administration would look like, because now he and the people around him know that they have to stack it with loyalists. Would something like this happen the next time around? We just don't know. But also, where's this dazzling detail where Donahue basically just calls him out and says, why don't you, you're not qualified to do all of this. What is this quote here? Why don't you go back and, we'll wait for an oil spill for you to litigate or something like that. But it's extraordinary. I mean, how close this came to happening. And
Yeah, can I just point? I want to encourage the audience. I want to encourage everyone, no matter what your faith, whether you worship, Jesus or AR-15s or whatever it is, please get down on your knees and say a prayer of thanks that Donald Trump was stopped from doing this very simple thing by embarrassment. Because apparently what happened was that Donahue said, look, if you do this, if you appoint this guy, the leadership of the Justice Department is going to resign. That's going to look bad for you. And fortunately, the autocrat in the United States, Donald Trump, unlike, say, Vladimir Putin, cared enough about his ego and what people thought about him that he thought that somehow this mass resignation was too much to bear, because we were that close. It was all we needed was for Trump not to care, and he would have gone through with this.
Yeah, let me just read you this one. I was looking for it while we were talking here. Donahue is telling Trump, look, don't do this. There's going to be the resignations. Also, this guy, Jeffrey Clark, has no qualification to be attorney general. He's never been a criminal attorney. He's never conducted a criminal investigation in his life. He's never been in front of a grand jury, much less a jury trial. And Clark objects. Well, I've done a lot of very complicated appeals in civil litigation, environmental litigation, things like that, Clark said, according to Donahue's deposition. That's right, Donahue said. He responded, you're an environmental lawyer. How about you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill? So here's my thought. Now, I urge people to listen to our podcast tomorrow because I sit down with the Atlantic's Pulitzer Prize winning author Jennifer Senior, who has written this profile of Steve Bannon, America's Rasputin. And Bannon is a smart guy and he's very influential, but he's also a revolutionist. And I keep thinking of this scene with Steve Bannon in the office. So they're appealing to Trump's ego and his vanity. You know, this will make you look weak. A guy like Bannon will say, do you want to make a difference or you're not? This is your moment. You know, let's blow it up. We said we were going to burn it down and drain the swamp. This is the moment for you to do it. If there had been one other person in that room, I think the decision we'll never know, but this is hypothetical, but might have been different. And the next time around when these decisions are made, it will be these fuck it all, blow it all up, burn it all down folks who are going to be there saying, you are the president, you can do anything you want, right? I mean, that's the real concern.
Yeah, I mean, look, people, what you are watching in the January 6th hearings is game film. You are watching game film of
that's
the
good.
the autocratic team running its plays. And there's what, 7 of them, Charlie? There's the sort of DOJ angle, there's the pressuring Mike Pence angle, there's the, pressuring the states angle, there's the alternate slates of electors. And they ran these plays and they will run them again. And they are now literally in the process, as we were discussing in the primaries, of putting in place the people who will run the plays more effectively. You need to be studying the game film and preparing yourself for the next round, because it's not a game, right? It's the United States of America.
That's pretty good. I like that game film thing. You should do something with that. You should write it or something. Being a writer and all of that stuff. Okay, so we've had this entire discussion without mentioning the name of the president of the United States, which I don't know. It seems just weird, but maybe it's where we're at right now. I mean, the stock market has been melting down. The Fed is about to jack up interest rates. Inflation is just, absolutely on fire. And that sort of behind the scenes whispering, gosh, we have to have a plan B for Biden breaks out into the open. That big story. I don't think you and I have talked since the New York Times reported about all the Democrats who are saying he's just too old. He needs to step aside. I don't know. Where do you come down? I mean, you've been critical of Biden's age, but I get stuck on the question of Democrats need a plan B. They have no plan B, and I can't come up with a good plan B for them, which is an interesting moment for a political party. What do you think?
I am with our friend JVL. I am a huge Mayor Pete fan. I don't know, though, how you put a white guy up as the nominee who is not Joe Biden.
You left out a word.
Instead of what? Oh, the gay guy?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I think you have an internal problem first, which is you'd be bumping out Kamala Harris. You'd be bumping out a black woman to do that, and that would be such a crisis among progressives that would just not. But I mean, I'm actually a Kamala Harris fan. I like her. I like Mayor Pete more, but I don't really get why people don't like her so much. But it's a problem. And I do believe Joe Biden's too old. But Charlie, the fundamental problem is we're asking the Democratic Party to be the sane party. And the problem is the Democratic Party has beliefs. It has an identity. It's at least half progressive. And so they have a bunch of policy ideas that they want to pursue, which don't always work out, as with crime, as with inflation, as with the border, whatever. And so it's a really tall order for us to get them to set aside the policy agenda and say, just be the party of sensible suburbanites.
They had one job. You folks had just one job. Do not fuck it up so bad that Donald Trump comes back in. One job. So, yeah.
All right. A little ray of hope, right? We've talked.
We saved this for what? We're like 45 minutes into the podcast. Okay. No.
All right. My little ray of hope is San Francisco, right? The same way.
Wow.
Okay. Go with me on this.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
The same way that district in South Texas is like Hispanic. It's like the whole district is Hispanic practically. The whole voting population of San Francisco is Democratic, is progressive, right? It's like what, 7% Republican. So the point is, they voted out, they recalled the crazy DA Chesapeake, and they decided, Democrats did, that this went too far and they wanted sanity. So there is still in the Democratic Party, in one party, enough of a population of voters to make sanity happen. It can happen. It did happen. How's that?
Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna take a phone call here. Hold on. Yeah. Amazon.com, please. Yes, thank you. When can you get this shipment of a drum to Mr. William Saletan? A drum, yeah. Okay, if you could deliver a drum, yeah. No, could it be this week? Because next week I actually want to talk to him, whether he understands what it means to be beaten like a drum. I said, sorry, Will, I had to make that call. I don't know. I am struggling against the negativity here. It's just, and I feel there's a kind of a flailing around and this disconnect. So I live here in Wisconsin, as you know, as I bring up on a regular basis, and the political ads are just pounding the airwaves. And they're not about January 6th, let me tell you. I mean, they're about three things. They are about inflation, crime, street crime, and the border, just pounding, 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 pounding. And that's what's going to determine the outcome of the election. And then I turn on certain cable outlets, and you wouldn't know that those are major issues at all. And I just don't know whether or not this is going to click. Now, I did listen to President Biden's speech to the AFL-CIO yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was a mixed bag, obviously, as all Biden speeches are a mixed bag. And there was a lot there. He was throwing up a lot against the wall. And I was thinking, okay, that's a good point, but it's going to get lost and everything. There are themes that I think can be effective that they could use. The problem is that I think the speech sort of captured one of the problems of the Democratic Party is that because it's a coalition, you know this better than I do, because it's a coalition, they have to appeal to all of these different constituencies at the same time. And so that's much harder for them to come up with a unified issue or to drill down on a specific point. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if you make just 2 points or 3 points and you pound them, pound them, pound them, you can really make headway. But because he's a Democrat, he has to make 14 points because you got to check that box and that box and that box. And by the end of the speech, you go, okay, he made a good point back there, but I kind of forgot what it was. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Totally. I mean,
Okay.
Charlie, don't you think that if you went to Donald Trump and said, all right, we're taking Biden out of the game, we're going to put you in the game, and your job is to go out and sell the presidential record of the last year and a half, don't you think he could do it? I mean, Trump did it when he was president. We only heard the good news. We only heard about the jobs that were created. We only heard about the growth. Biden has, a similar record of jobs and growth. He doesn't have what Trump has, which is the ability to market this one thing, to drive this message. And, Trump had the advantage of not caring about anything else, not caring about any of the negative stuff, and Biden does. But I just don't see. I don't see Biden having the talent as a campaigner to win that.
In his defense, Will, I think one of the real problems of this White House, though, is that every once in a while he will show that he does get it and he has the right instincts, and then his own White House aides will walk it back. And we've seen that with Ukraine. We've seen it with a number of other things. And I actually think that he gets how the middle class reacts to inflation. I mean, when I hear him say that, I said, okay, he actually talking about a $30 cost of something, what that means to a middle class person. I'm guessing he may be the only person in some circles who actually thinks about what $30 a month means to people. Okay, so I'm going to give him credit for all of that. But he's surrounded himself with, again, sort of the professional class who are like, well, if you don't say this, the union head here is going to say this, and the teacher union wants to say this. And then, of course, the unions want more jobs, but we have to be concerned about the environmental lobby here. And of course, we have to, throw something out. And that's the part of the problem. So in many ways, I don't think that a lot of this is Biden's problem. It's like, and you read between the lines, and he's getting frustrated with this. He'll go out and he'll say something, and then you have the geeks back at the White House go, well, no, he didn't really mean that. You know what?
Okay, but you're Charlie. You're letting Biden off the hook way too easy here. Like Donald Trump would never put up with that. He would never let people walk him back, right? If Biden had the vigor to get out there and drive it, he would drive it. And I agree with you. Joe Biden does not have a thinking problem. Joe Biden does not have a lack of understanding of what Americans are going through. He is still middle class Joe. He understands the mainstream on jobs, on the economy, on inflation, on crime. He was out, he's clearly out. He understands all of that. Joe Biden has a talking problem, not a thinking problem, and that is a huge problem because who else, they're like, what was it it was about the protecting Supreme Court justices, and Biden hadn't said something about it, and the response from Chris Coons, the senator from Delaware, is like, oh well, the White House press secretary is talking about it. You need the president to be saying these things. The president has to drive this message, and this president isn't doing it. And honestly, I think he can't do it.
Why do you think he can't do it?
I,
I'm not trying to carry water from him. I just want to hear your point of view.
I've heard him try, and he doesn't have the clarity, the focus, the vigor. He doesn't he's just not a strong enough speaker. But the thing is, I totally reject this right-wing view of Joe Biden, that Biden isn't running things, that he doesn't understand what's going on. Biden is extremely lucid. He doesn't have a problem understanding everything. He just can't talk. And it's not a stutter thing. Honestly, he was better. I watched a video earlier this week of Joe Biden from 2 years ago, even 2 years ago, he was better at driving a message. It's a fact that just with the age that everybody loses some of this. And unfortunately, this guy is about 80 years, what is he, 78, 79? He's just lost too much of that.
Well, you use the word vigor a lot, so I think that's one of the questions. But to your main criticism, where you said I give him too much credit, you made a good point, okay? Which is that I'm saying let Joe Biden be Joe Biden, which is probably talk about a high risk, since I think he suffered from logorrhea for many years. The old Joe Biden was kind of long-winded, gaffe prone. But your point is that Donald Trump would never put up with his staff cutting him off at the knees. Why is Joe Biden putting up with that?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Yep.
And so and I'm not sure that's an age thing. At some point, you walk back in the White House and say, I am the president here, and you just made me look bad. You just made me look weak. How does that happen?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
really, that's not a speaking issue. That's not an age issue. That's what I mean. Here's a guy who's been around for a long time. He knows how to shut down somebody that makes him look bad, right?
Right. Charlie, does this go back to your point about the Democratic Party? I'm just thinking about what you said about the Democrats being a loose coalition of, diverse points of view. And Joe Biden, a thing about Democrats that makes him better than Republicans, in my point of view, is not driven by sort of a cult, not driven by a single ideology, open to different points of view, open to different ideas and issues. And maybe Joe Biden is the classic Democrat, right? I see your point of view. I understand this concern. I said this thing about the border. I said this thing about crime. But yeah, you make a good point about, police violence or whatever. And maybe he just doesn't have what Trump has, which makes, I have this message, I'm going to drive it no matter what, which makes him simultaneously less electable, less likely to win an election, and better as a president in some ways, because as we were just talking about, Trump was so driven by his idea that he wouldn't listen to the facts about literally who won the 2020 election.
Anything else that we haven't touched on? Because we just waded into this cloud of news. We didn't even talk about the Fed, and whether or not the Fed has control of inflation, whether or not there's anything the administration. See, I mean, this is part of the problem for Joe Biden right now, which is not a Joe Biden problem. It's the problem of reality, which is the president of the United States has very limited ability to change inflation, to do anything about inflation. So what you have to do is you have to look like you are, which means you throw things against the wall, you write letters to oil companies, you do right? I mean, but none of it actually makes it any difference. But it has to be frustrating. Is the one issue that you have to control, you are unable to control.
It's hilarious to me because of the Republican lie about Democrats being socialists, right? Joe Biden's a socialist. They're going to run your life, right? If we actually had socialism, the government could, we have a problem with gas prices, right? Like we're going to issue a mandate. Now, socialist economics don't work, don't get me wrong, but you'd have a lever you could pull. Joe Biden has no levers, right? As you're pointing out, this letter that he wrote to the oil companies, that is the president of a capitalist country begging capitalists to change the way that what they're charging the refineries and the prices. And he can't make it happen because of capitalism.
Well, the funny thing about this is I am old enough to remember when Richard Nixon, who was regarded as a conservative Republican at the time, actually imposed wage and price controls. Doesn't that seem like from a different, just era? I mean, it is a different century, quite literally. But there was a time when and it didn't work. It was disastrous. It, led to all kinds of stagflation and everything. But it is interesting how, thinking in our political world has shifted since then, because the idea of imposing wage and price controls is not even on the horizon. I mean, is anybody even suggesting something like that?
No, I don't.
Not
think
even Elizabeth Warren, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from her on this, and it's, to be fair, Democrats just want to blame the companies, right? They want to make sure they can find somebody. There's Putin, it's his price hike, or the oil companies are gouging you. But I mean, Biden does seem to have a point in this letter about the price of oil relative to the price of gas, and that the margins have gone up, and it's just that, he can't. This is a case where, because of his office, he can't make it happen. He doesn't have those powers.
And this is part of the problem, is that the numbers are just eye popping. I'm seeing now that wholesale inflation is now at 10.8% in May. Wholesale prices rose. I lived through the 70s when things were bad. Never anything like this. Producer price index rose 0.08% for the month, which would be a 10.8% annualized interest. The monthly gain was in line with estimates. The annual gain was slightly off the record, 11.5% hit earlier this year. The data is significant, and the prices at the wholesale level feed through to consumer prices. Gag. So all of this news seems like it's going to get worse. Anyone who thinks that, well, it's only June and plenty of time to turn around. I think we've kind of passed that turnaround point. So any president faced with this kind of headwinds would be in a lot of political trouble.
Right. So the plane is too high, or whatever. The good news is things will come down, but the problem is it's going to come down in the form of a crash, right? I mean, I don't know this for sure, but when you overheat an economy, right, you need to cool it down, and if the cooling down is fast, that's a crash. People get laid off. We've already seen dives in the market. So nature will restore its balance, but it will hurt. It will hurt, and it looks like it's going to hurt right around the election.
Well, and it's going to happen today. Federal Reserve expected to do something it has not done in 28 years. Raise interest rates by 0.75 percentage point. So we'll be able to talk about that later in the week. Will Saletan, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Charlie.
The Bulwark podcast is produced by Katie Cooper with audio production by Jonathan Siri. I'm Charlie Sykes. Thank you for listening to today's Bulwark podcast, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll do this all over again.
There are about 1 million podcasts about money, but Bad with Money with Gabby Dunn is the one where finances meet social justice.
Investing in dating with Bella Gandhi.
Do you believe that people should pay for dating apps?
To me, invest in the dating process. There's nothing more important than finding the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. There's a stigma. Everything should be free. You're going to go to Whole Foods, meet eyes over mangoes, and all the dominoes fall in perfect order. That's just a load of garbage.
Bad with Money. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.